Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into an absolutely wild slate of events that prove just how dramatically the world can shift in a single 24-hour period. We're going to look at the raw data, the emerging crises, and the massive historic victories that define this specific moment in time, June 13th, 2026. This isn't just a rundown of the news, it's a look at how entirely separate global spheres are colliding to shape the reality we're all living in right now.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We'll hit the Middle East, Eastern Europe, some major global unrest, a really tough public health update, and then we'll wrap up with some seriously historic sports milestones. Let's get into it.
All right, Section 1, Middle East Peace and Conflict, and the Fragile State of Diplomacy. So there's this massive disconnect right now over a finalized peace text. It's like two sides reading entirely different books. On one hand, you've got President Donald Trump projecting total optimism, literally saying a comprehensive ceasefire agreement could be signed within 24 hours. But then you flip over to the Iranian state media and hardline factions, and it's a completely different story. They're totally downplaying it. To them, this isn't some grand permanent settlement. It's just a tactical pause, basically a move designed to get the current naval blockade lifted. It's the exact same document, but two totally different strategic realities. And behind closed doors, well, the friction is absolutely off the charts. Washington just flat out rejected Iran's proposal to immediately release 50% of its frozen global assets in exchange for an initial truce. And Iran's response? Leaked U.S. intel shows they are aggressively protecting their leverage. We're talking about sealing off highly enriched uranium stockpiles by literally collapsing tunnels and rigging storage facility entrances with explosives. Add to that the thousands of hardline protesters flooding the streets, demanding that no deal goes through without Supreme Leader Mujtaba Khamenei's explicit public sign-off. It is a complete diplomatic powder keg. And while the diplomats are, debating truces, the actual kinetic reality on the ground is just shattering regional lines. Take the number 70. That's how many Hezbollah targets Israel struck across southern Lebanon today in just one massive wave. Hezbollah fired right back, sending swarms of combat drones that actually managed to punch through air defenses to strike IDF military zones between Adamit and Aram Sheh. So yeah, diplomacy and active combat aren't just happening on parallel tracks right now, they're slamming into each other in real time. Moving on to Section 2, Escalation in Eastern Europe and the staggering numbers behind the conflict. Nearly 2.4 million. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the new authorized strength of the Russian armed forces. Bolstering Moscow's long-term war footing, President Vladimir Putin just signed a decree pushing the military to this historic total. We're looking at over 1.5 million active duty troops now. It's a profound, long-term numerical commitment to what has become a deeply entrenched war. What we're witnessing here is a brutal battle of industrial endurance, where every single action creates a massive economic ripple. According to Ukrainian intel, Russian factories are turning out something like 50 Kal-101 cruise missiles and 70 Iskander-M ballistic missiles every single month. Their goal? To completely overload Ukrainian radars. They're even developing a new Iskander-1000 variant that can strike 1,000 kilometers deep. But Ukraine is hitting back hard. Their long-range drone strikes on Russian infrastructure are causing massive disruptions. It's gotten to the point where major Russian energy suppliers like Tatneft are actually having to force strict fuel limits on everyday citizens because of localized shortages. So the chain reaction goes straight from the front lines right down to the neighborhood gas pump.
All right, Section 3, Global Tragedies and Unrest and the Heavy Human Toll.
Stepping away from the battlefield, today brought a really devastating series of localized crises across 3 different continents. Over in Europe, alpine rescue teams confirmed that 7 hikers were tragically killed in massive avalanches on Mont Blanc, all within a 24-hour window. Meanwhile, in Asia, India is mourning after an Air Force transport plane suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure and crashed in Assam, killing 5 military personnel. And in South America, Bolivia is in the middle of a massive political meltdown. The country's defense and education ministers abruptly resigned amid violent nationwide anti-government protests. Whether it's the unpredictable forces of nature or sudden political collapse, it's a stark reminder of just how fragile our global systems really are. Which brings us to a critical area of vulnerability in Section 4, worsening public health crises. In Bangladesh, public health emergency teams are sounding the alarm over a serious escalation in the country's ongoing measles outbreak. It's truly heartbreaking. 5 more children died from this highly preventable disease in just the last 24 hours. It's a stark, localized example of what happens the second a healthcare system gets pushed past its breaking point. And these vulnerabilities, they're constantly compounded by shifts in international policy. The UN recently put out a pretty grim assessment, warning that global disease and HIV prevention initiatives have taken a severe hit following recent White House humanitarian aid spending cuts. We're seeing the brutal, real-world consequences of those funding choices right now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're dealing with an ongoing Ebola wave that has rapidly climbed to 689 cases and 139 confirmed deaths. It really highlights the literal life or death connection between global humanitarian funding and boots-on-the-ground contagion control. Okay, let's switch gears for Section 5, Historic Milestones in Sports. Because history isn't just defined by conflict and crisis.
For over half a century, literally 53 years, New York Knicks fans have known almost nothing but pure heartbreak. We're talking a massive championship drought stretching all the way back to 1974. But today, the wait is absolutely over. The Knicks finally took down the San Antonio Spurs 94-90 in a wild Game 5 to win the World Championship title. As you can imagine, it sparked some absolutely massive, long-awaited celebrations all over New York City.
And the sports history doesn't stop there. We also crowned a brand new champion in football today. The Louisville Kings won the very first United Bowl, beating the DC Defenders 27-20. It was a perfectly thrilling way to cap off the United Football League's inaugural season, cementing the Louisville Kings in the history books forever.
Meanwhile, the massive, newly expanded 48-team FIFA World Cup is completely taking over North America right now. We're already seeing incredible matchups like Qatar versus Switzerland and Brazil versus Morocco. But the logistics behind pulling this off, they are just staggering. To put it in perspective, Mexican tourism officials are bracing for an unprecedented 10 million international travelers during this month-long tournament. 10 million! It's an unbelievable display of global unity, economic stimulation, and sheer logistical scale.
So, stepping back from all of this, here's the question I want to leave you with. How do all of these completely different threads actually intertwine? From the high-stakes friction of geopolitical negotiations and tragic localized crises, all the way to the unifying joy of a 53-year sports drought ending, how do these events combine to shape the incredibly interconnected world we share? It's a vast amount of information to process, I know, but figuring out these connections is exactly how we make sense of our reality today and prepare for whatever comes tomorrow. Thanks for tuning into this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.